Good evening. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the City of Lockport for Wednesday, August 10th. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A roll call for quorum, please.
Jim Bellata. Absent. Dave Oxley.
Yes.
Sherry Wold. Here. Bill Maloney.
Here.
Brent Porfilio. Scott Lakins. Lance Dees.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum, just barely. Regarding the minutes of the previous meeting, the minutes submitted to us are incomplete, cannot be approved as such. This time we'll entertain a motion to table these minutes to the September meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Thies, second by Oxley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Let the record show Mr. Bellata has arrived. So we now have 5 present. The purpose of this board is to review all zoning and development plan requests for compliance with the city's comprehensive plan, the city's zoning ordinance, and certain components of the city's development code. This board also reviews and makes final determination of variance requests from the city's zoning ordinances. Mike, what do we got here?
The first item on the agenda is 15636 South Redbud Lane. This is a variance request. The variance is requested to reduce the required rear yard setback for a proposed deck, which would be set back 24.4 feet. The requirement is 30 feet. The deck would be attached to the dwelling, and per the zoning ordinance, must meet principal building requirements. The deck cannot be considered a permitted obstruction since it would be more than 4 feet above the average level of the adjoining ground. In addition, a roof would be constructed over the deck and attached to the house. The roof is then also considered part of the dwelling. The parcel is in the Maple Hill subdivision. It's surrounded by single-family homes. The applicant is seeking to, again, this is a 9-foot-high deck attached to the dwelling with a attached stairway down to the ground. The applicant's contractor applied for a deck permit on June 29th, 2016 to replace the existing deck, and the existing 8-foot deep deck does meet the minimum rear yard setback since there's 8.4 feet between the house and the rear required setback. Staff informed the applicant that the current proposed 14-foot deck would not meet the setback requirement, and options were discussed, which included, things like redesigning the deck in different ways to meet the setback, or else they could actually drop the deck down to a lower height prior to the 8.4-foot distance and then have it below 4 feet so that it can encroach into the rear yard. The applicant decided to pursue the setback variance, obviously, and then staff did do a little checking in the subdivision to see if there were other homes that had any kind of similar situations. There were 6 other lots that had similar lot depth, which were less than 126 feet. And we did find, obviously, the homes on each lot vary from lot to lot, the size of the home, resulting in different varied depths, which one could have a deck. Staff reviewed this according to the findings of fact and found compliance with 3 of the findings of fact and not compliance with 4, essentially, is kind of the summary of it. The property, the ones that wouldn't be compliant with is a hardship wasn't truly identified. That's the primary standard that was not met. And then there's some other ones that are listed in the report. Based on those findings of fact, staff recommends staff finds that the applicant has not demonstrated a unique and justifiable hardship and therefore recommends denial of the variance to reduce the rear yard building setback for a proposed deck at 15636 South Redbud Lane. If the Plan and Zoning Commission chooses to approve the variance, staff suggests making it subject to the following condition: that the variance is restricted to the rear yard building setback, specifically for the roof deck, as shown on the attached plans.
Okay, thank you. At this time, the public hearing is now open. Is the applicant present? Care to speak on this matter? Sure, you want to step up to the microphone, state your name?
Good evening. I'm Darrell Fitzgerald. This is my wife, Debbie Fitzgerald.
Good evening.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank Mike Ferenczak for his resource in helping us get through this process and trying to figure out how we can make this work. I really do appreciate what he has done for us, and he kind of held our hand through this process, so he did a great job. Well, I noticed you guys said our hardship, we could not, I guess, hardship that you guys felt that was, what we want to use here, Debbie?
I would like to say sufficient maybe, or in your eyes, but the hardship that we personally feel as a family, having been in our dwelling for 9 years, when we purchased this home, we had no idea that we would not be able to do anything in terms of enjoying the outdoors. It came with the little bump out that you have just for, you know, an escape. It's not even really a deck. Am I correct? It's just that little bump out, and we would like to be able to have a deck to go out and sit out and enjoy the weather when we do have nice weather in this area. Having been from Virginia, you know, we relocated here for my job. I had no idea when we purchased that house that it was over the size, because we bought it from the builder and it had been on the market for quite some time. So had I known that, that's really a knowledge deficit. So that's a huge hardship on homeowners who've been paying their taxes and maintaining their property for 9 years to then finally get financially stable enough to say, okay, now we can build a deck, and to have this come up. That was a huge hardship for us, because had we known, I tell you, I would not have purchased the property. Had we known that the house was too large for the size of the lot and all of those incidents, we wouldn't have purchased the house. That was not disclosed to us. So that truly is our hardship.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here else from the public that cared to speak on this particular case? Okay.
Hi, Ward. I'm Linda Serafini. I am the Fitzgerald's neighbor. And me and my husband actually would be in a similar situation in that our property also is about the same depth. And again, we were not aware of that situation, that it would prohibit us building decks in that depth. And again, we too are saving up hopefully to someday build a deck. The builder who built our properties gave us not even enough for a grill. So when we do want to grill, a lot of times we find ourselves on the driveway. So it would be advantageous for us and for the neighborhood. We are a very close-knit neighborhood, and we would like to be able to have the opportunity to sit out on our decks, enjoy, watch other neighbors, enjoy the beautiful forest we have across from us, and just that parts of, you know, owning the properties that we have. I personally don't see where having our decks being that far back would be a hindrance or prohibit the beauty of the community, other than just enhancing it and allowing us to have these beautiful opportunities to enjoy what, you know, the communities offer. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here that cared to speak on this particular case?
My name is Ron Burns. Our lots are probably 50 yards apart. I live on Mackenzie, and Darrell is on Redbud. But I know what size of deck that he has. I helped him change the patio door glass in it because it fogged up. And I couldn't hardly turn around on the deck. It was so tiny. So, and I know Darrell would have a very nice job doing it, having it done. So it looks really nice. It'll be good for the community.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then, with the panel, Mr. Thies, any questions or comments?
I understand the issue that you're going through. From a city standpoint, a legal standpoint, you know, we have to prove that there is a justifiable hardship, because otherwise your neighbor, and I understand that you would be the neighbor, but you could move too. The next neighbor could build a deck that if we would approve something like this, could come to your property line. Because it sets a precedent for what could happen in the future. And that is really the biggest issue. So unless there is a true hardship about the way that the property is or otherwise, it makes it very challenging for us to grant that because it sets a precedent for all the neighbors, future or present. And we wouldn't want you then to have to deal with a neighbor, good or bad, that would build a deck that would infringe on your rights as well. They may not do as good of a job as what you are going to do, and so that may become something that would be an issue. I appreciate that the staff has investigated a number of different options. One more to throw out there, it looks like if it was a 4-foot high deck, if you kept your existing deck the way that it is and used the stairs to go down to a 4-foot deck, you could have one that's twice the size as you wanted to right now, because it can encroach into that setback because it's only 4 foot high. The challenge, from what I understand, is that it's 9 foot high, becomes a part of the principal building at that point because it has a roof. And so in essence, somebody could also come back and take your deck that you've built, enclose it, and basically make it a livable space, which would then create an issue long term because then you've created a problem in a livable space and a true setback issue. So I believe that there are options for you to look into. I can't support a variance like this because of those precedents that we would otherwise set, and I can't see a variance as much as I truly understand how much you would want to enjoy your deck and those types of things. It's just we can't set a precedent for all of your neighbors and many other people within the city to be able to encroach as deep as they want to. Unfortunately, there's not like a buffer or a percentage that is flexible either way. If we would grant yours, an additional whatever it is, 9 feet or something like that, we could also grant one that's 30 feet because there would then be no holds barred on how big a deck could become. So I can't support it for that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You mentioned that having someone else build a deck that would encroach into my property line. If you're saying that specifically logistically, the way our house is positioned, our neighbor, since we're on a corner lot, that could never happen. Being in both healthcare and education, I totally understand being consistent, but I also understand equity. And equity and equal are not the same. So seeing a hardship for one family not being able to enjoy the home that they purchased under the guise of thinking you can do something to it significantly is different than maybe purchasing a home in Illinois and having all of the information fully disclosed. So that produces, I think, a serious equity issue. We love our house, we love our neighborhood, we have no plans to leave, so when you mention someone then coming and changing it to maybe a Four Seasons room or what have you, it's not encroaching upon the public utilities. It's not encroaching upon the neighbor behind us or on either side because there's no safety piece there. So that's why I'm really a little at a loss or confused by what you're saying. What I hear you communicate is a very standard blanket statement in terms of maintaining consistency that I totally understand. But I do see this as a little different.
It goes beyond you and the neighbor on either side of you, whichever one has that issue, because it then becomes a citywide issue. And so anybody could come in then and say, you granted this variance for no unique hardship. I want my deck to be as big as possible. And so it no longer just becomes your subdivision, it becomes a citywide issue, which from an equity standpoint, then you're encumbering many different neighbors, not just your own neighbors and your neighbors within that situation where somebody could come in and put a totally schlocky deck up that, I'm not saying that it encroaches on your property line, but I'm saying it gets very close and becomes an issue. So you put a fireplace out there, you put any types of things out there, and it becomes something that impacts you as a neighbor or other people throughout the city as a neighbor. And given that there is an option for you to use your existing deck and use the stairs that you have to create the size deck that you truly want for patio furniture, for grills, I believe that's what you're saying.
I don't think so.
Below 4 feet.
You theoretically could make the deck wider. There would be a way to build the deck wider along the back length wall, or the back wall, along the length of the back wall of the house.
Saying if it goes down to 4 feet.
Or there's that option of going down to 4 feet and then having a very expansive
Right.
deck in the backyard. That is correct, that's a fact.
You can't go down to 4 though, Lance, there's a window, there's a door right below it. It's a walkout. So you have to come to the side and then shoot
I
down.
think we agree, there are other options besides what they're proposing. That's,
Well,
Can be.
how much
further
does,
comments, Lance?
how much does the property slope, Mike, from north to south?
gentlemen?
Very deep.
Daryl could comment on that a little better, I
Yeah,
think.
north to south, the property, basically, when I come to the 8-foot point, property began to slope. So that's why, really, we need, I would have loved, 16-foot would have been suitable, to be perfectly honest with you, but me and my builder, we decided to go 14-foot because we figured we could fit that inside the envelope better. And also by putting the patio that we would need coming out of the walkout, that will also shore that up, so now it'll help the drain around the lot as well. So theoretically, you know, I get what you're saying, and I appreciate you guys suggesting the other design. Honestly, sir, that design, if we did it for you, you would say it would not work, because you could not place your furniture and move and do things you like to do, your deck furniture in that situation. Basically, what you're telling me is I will end up with just an 8-foot strip. I already have an 8-foot strip that I can't really use as very well to leisurely enjoy my property. And again, I don't know if you had a chance to see the proposed thing. I think what we're building is above what our minimum requirements are.
Totally agree.
It's
Totally agree.
it's like I said, when we build this, the great thing about it is, as my neighbors have stated, I think they will enjoy it more than we will enjoy it. So I think it will.
Well, the setback, Mike, as I read it, the rear yard setback would only be 24.4 feet,
Right, so this would be an encroachment of 5.6 feet.
5.6 feet. But yet, there's been many subdivisions that have came before this commission and have asked a 25-foot front yard setback, and we've approved it.
Right,
This
it's part of the
subdivision-
PUD.
What I'm looking at here, the way I see it, the lot slopes about 7 feet from point A to point B. So where do you take the balance point, the 4 foot? And this is something, we had an issue with the deck versus a porch several years back on 7th and Jefferson Street. And when it came down to it, it didn't matter.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, we've got a front yard setback or a rear yard setback. We've got subdivisions that you can park the car in the 25-foot, but because he's 5.5, well, is that .4 or
It was 5.6.
you're going hundreds?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay, so you're 5.5 feet over the rear yard setback. And that's the only thing that is 2 posts or 3 posts. So, and then we've got a subdivision, every house in that subdivision is on a hill. They all slope 6 feet to 8 feet and 80 from the front yard to the backyard. And I think we've got a very unique circumstance with this subdivision. The topographical is that.
Right, I mean, there's a
And you're
fair,
following the code, and
right.
you've done everything you're supposed to do here.
Right, I just point out, I mean, I didn't give a full breakdown of all the lot depths out there. I mean, there are lots that are as deep as 175, quite a few actually on the north-south streets. But then, yes, many of the lots, or several of the lots are in the 120, 130 range, and that's where this lot is. And that, combined with the depth of the house that was chosen to be placed on that lot, leaves the remaining area.
You've got between the corner of the garage and the beginning of the deck, it drops 8 feet, or, 7 feet.
Right.
So then what? So to put a deck downstairs, would be a total inconvenience, because you've got the sliding doors there, the same as you have upstairs, but yet, if you wanna have a cookout, food's in the kitchen, now you're up 12 steps or 13 steps. And I wouldn't consider it convenient, and that's just me, but, I mean, quite honestly, we've got the neighbors here saying, we don't have a problem with it. And we do take every consideration to every circumstance, every subdivision, every location, and I personally don't have an issue with it. As long as the neighbors don't have an issue, and that's something, and it's not your fault or staff's fault. When we ran into this issue several years back, it was gonna be corrected. And we're still at it today, that it's still, it's over 4 foot. And what it ended up with was when you measured the deck, it was only 32 inches off grade, not 48. But I personally don't have an issue with it based on the slopes we have in the subdivision, the different designs here, and we're only encroaching 5 feet. We've got front yard setbacks that are 25.
Must be a 30-foot front yard setback that has pushed the house that extra 5 feet back in the lot.
John, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm John Wade from A&J Construction. Actually, I developed the property there, but I didn't actually build this man's house. I built probably 25 in there. So I can see his hardship. I can see the man's hardship.
Pardon me, I can't hear you.
I can see this couple's hardship with what they have there.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at all the demographics of it, the topographical of it, the front yard setback, everything. I mean, you've got a 7.5% slope on the driveway in 30 feet. You had to move it back to less. I mean, it was a unique piece of property when you developed it. It's very nice, a very nicely done subdivision. I don't have an issue with it. Staff's done their job, their research, and this is their facts of finding, but it's up to us to decide where to go with it.
Dave, I think those are excellent points. I think the slope is,
I can't hear you.
I think that those are excellent points, and I think that the slope is certainly something that could create that unique issue for this house as opposed to other ones that may or may not have a flat
Right. And-
surface behind
And
it.
that's why we take each individual case by case, and that's, I mean, that, 8 feet and 80? That's where we're at with it. And we're only 5 feet over the setback.
Mrs. Wold, any comments?
Not at this moment.
Jimmy?
Mr. Bellotta?
Hardship is a very subjective term, right? So what, is this really a hardship? And maybe in some people's definitions it is, others it is not. Staff is doing what they are there to do and follow the ordinances that the city of Lockport put in there to protect all the other property owners. I drove by this morning, got out, took pictures, saw what you're trying to do. I think it'll enhance your home. I think it'll enhance the neighborhood. I almost moved in right next door to Mr. Burns, so I know the subdivision a while ago. So, I saw that there are some unique traits to that subdivision. One of them is being the slopes going in there. Some of them had some smaller backyards, absolutely. I never thought of it, and I did developing and building myself about putting an additional deck on and the problems it might cause. But in this particular case, looking at literally on a case-by-case basis, looking at how far your neighbors are behind you, I see the lot, your neighbors here next to you, that's gonna go through the same thing. It'd be different if the guy right behind you that you would be facing the back said, absolutely no, there's no way. I don't see that here. You're putting a quality product in. You have a good builder doing it. You're gonna follow all their building codes. I don't have a problem with it as well, so.
Yeah, I've looked at the paperwork submitted, and I've been by the home, and I have to concur with staff's opinion that a justifiable hardship really does not exist. What do we consider to be a hardship? For instance, there's mention made of the setback. We've had occasions where residents come to us and they ask to put a ramp from the front door out to the sidewalk because they need to make the house handicap accessible. And our code does not allow a ramp of that type. That's a legitimate hardship. They need to have a ramp and we make a variance to allow that ramp for the amount of time that that particular person needs it. That's what we mean by a hardship. You said you weren't aware of what the ordinances were when you purchased the house, but the thing is, whose obligation was it to inform you? The builders, should you have found out? I mean, I don't dispute what you're saying, that you didn't know what the ordinance was at the time you bought the house, but that, you know, that's where they say to let the buyer beware. It's the buyer's responsibility to find out if you're, what the codes are, if you're near the airport, if you're near a railroad, if you're near an interstate. All of those things are incumbent on the purchaser to determine before he makes the purchase.
Sure, you have any comments?
Sherry, you have any other comment?
No, I do not.
Okay, at this time, declare the public hearing closed.
Motion,
You have a motion?
close public hearing.
Oh, it's closed.
I would make a motion to allow the variance, subject to the building requirements of the building department.
I'll second that.
Have a motion from Mr. Oxley and a second from Mr. Bellotta for approval. Any further discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Jim Bellotta,
Yes.
Dave Oxley,
Yes.
Sherry Wold,
No.
Bill Maloney,
No.
and Lance Thies.
Yes.
Yeah, that should pass, right, 3-2?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion fails.
Motion.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, our zoning ordinance actually requires 4 affirmative votes to pass a request for a variance. So we seem to be at a point in the meeting where we have a couple of options, and one option may be, and I'm sure this is time sensitive for the applicants because they'd like to get this taken care of this summer, but you could table the matter until the next meeting when you have a larger group present to see if there's 4 affirmative votes and go from there. The other option is just to deem the decision this evening as a final decision. Certainly we can talk to the applicants and give them some options to go from there, but certainly be within your discretion to have the matter held over until next month. And again, I know it's time sensitive, but in a month's delay in this situation may be to your benefit when you have a larger group here, and then you can decide at that point if there are other members of the commission that would want to vote affirmatively or negatively on the application.
So because there's not 4 affirmative votes, it's considered not
It's
passed.
not passed, correct.
So what
Yeah,
would be?
even though it's a 3-2 vote this evening, which would be a majority vote, the zoning ordinance required, because there are 7 members of the commission, it would require 4 yes votes in order to pass something.
What would be the proper protocol if the motion and second we withdraw and
Too late for that.
put that as a to be on that?
Actually, the status is the application is still on file. It's still before the commission. The motion to pass or to approve it did not pass because it lacks that 4th vote. So you're still open for any motions on the topic. And one motion that you could make is table it until next month's meeting, and then the staff can have conversations with the applicants and work with them between now and then. And then when you have a larger attendance, you can make
They
a
have to
decision.
resubmit? Or
No, because their current application is still on file. It's not rejected. It's just the motion to approve did not pass. It was not a motion to deny.
Okay.
How about if we make it 13'6", so it gets 25
Well,
foot front yard setback?
Rather than get into all the possibilities, I would rather let them just return next month for reconsideration. Okay.
If they, if we knock it to 13'6" instead of 14 foot, then it's a 25 foot setback, same as the front yard was required. Anybody have a problem with that?
And the height? The height?
No. Setback, rear yard setback.
I'd,
Shorten it 6 inches. Then it's 25 foot. I mean, we approve subdivisions at 25-foot setbacks on front yards.
Still requires a variance, though, doesn't it?
This time I'm entertaining a motion to table it until the September meeting for reconsideration.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Motion for Mr. Bellotta, second by Mr. Thies. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, this will come back up on the agenda next month's meeting for reconsideration. You can leave it as submitted, or if you care to work with staff and revise it, it's up to you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, Yashina, the temple.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This evening, staff is recommending that the public hearing for this item be continued until September 13th. This is in order for us to work with the applicant on some details on the requested actions as well as the annexation agreement.
Okay, staff is asking this be tabled until September 13th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Thies, second from Moxley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
There was, on this property, there was a lot of issues when we annexed it before, so I would make sure I check that agreement well and see what requirements were.
Yes. Yeah, we're working to do exactly that, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, next case, Panatoni Development.
Yes.
I'll open the public hearing for that.
The commission, this is the amendment to a special use permit for a planned industrial development for Panatoni at the 355 Corporate Center. This is for Lot 3, and there's also final development plans being presented for Lot 3. Yeah, let me put the site plan up on the screen here. Okay. Oh, it's in that one as well? Okay. Like maybe, okay. All right. Okay, so the applicant, Panatoni Development, has submitted plans and is seeking approval of a amendment to special use and final development plans for a 300,000 square foot building in Lot 3 of the 355 Corporate Center. The applicant hopes to have the site constructed by July 2017, and attached to your report are the plans. The amendment is requested specifically for changes to Lot 3. So the amendment for the whole development is for Lot 3. Basically, the preliminary plan for 355 Corporate Center was approved in 2009, and in 2015, a revised preliminary plan was approved. I've also included a copy of that plan in your packet. Lot 3 here would be a modification to that plan from 2015. It would include a single or multi-tenant building for an office warehouse user. And in your packet there, you can see a comparison of the differences between the two. You know, there's still, well, originally there were buildings proposed on Lot 3, and now there's one building proposed. The two buildings had totaled 343,000 square feet, and now the one is 300,000. Basically, it's a reduction in the size of the building, an increase in the green space, and a reduction in some of the parking spaces and truck parking spaces. There's no impact to existing conditions on the site, like trees or anything like that. The building would meet building setback requirements. The height requirement is met. There's really, we worked with the applicant on the plans quite a bit to get them in compliance with the requirements, and there's only a few minor conditions that remain from that review. I don't know if there's any other key things to point out here. Basically, it's a pretty straightforward plan. Site data table, we'd asked them to add the 60 docks to show those on the plan. That was one of the conditions that remains. Pretty minor things. So, oh yeah, update too on the engineering. We do have, the engineer, our consulting engineer, Steve Gidley, has done the review on the, to update the plan, I'm sorry, he's done an updated review on the new plans, and we have that, Steve can comment on that if he'd like.
Yes, they've modified the few things that we gave them that we were concerned about, and overall, it's less impervious and more green space, so the detention and stormwater are fine. And the John Lane crossing is already built, as you know, so there's no issue with the roadways.
So staff had recommended motion here on the page 5, in, recommending, or if the commission so finds, they can recommend approval according to the conditions on that page, which include items 1A through 1E, which are some minor things that the planning was looking to have addressed, as well as any remaining comments from the engineering, which included submittal of a engineer's cost estimate, so we can obtain a engineering review fee based on that. And then follow-up, there's some other follow-up that needs to be done prior to start of construction, which is standard conditions. So that is staff's presentation. I think the applicant, Vince, is here and to present a little more, and if you'd like, and have any questions for him.
Vince Rosanova with Rosanova and Whitaker. My office is located at 30 West Jefferson Avenue in Naperville, here on behalf of the Panettone Development Corporation. I don't think I could say it much better than Mike did in his staff report just now. Better plan, allows us more flexibility in leasing, makes us more desirable in the marketplace. Instead of 343,000 square feet spread over 2 buildings, we have 300,000 square feet in one building. We reduce the number of truck docks, reduce the number of trailer parking spaces, enhance the overall green space, better product, better design, same great architecture, but better orientation towards I-355 as well. We're on board with all the conditions mentioned in the staff report just now, and I'm here to answer any questions this commission may have.
And if I could also just add, before Mike got here and Panettone was looking to move forward with this portion of the property, they had initially showed the building flipped with the loading docks facing I-355. And I had a conversation with Mr. Rosenberg, who is with the Panettone Group, and suggested that the building be flipped so that, visually along I-355, we weren't looking at a bunch of loading docks. And so he basically was willing to flip it and, meet that requirement. And so I just wanted to express that to the commission, because I think it's important to just stress that they've been they've worked very well with staff, and they're very cooperative in addressing our issues and concerns.
This puts all the truck docks on the east side away from the expressway, right? Oh, if applicant is all agreeable with staff's recommendations, I took a ride around over there. The first 2 buildings are complete, and quite impressed with the overall finish, the landscaping. I mean, about as thorough a job overall on the exterior as you could possibly ask for. Okay, Mr. Bellata, any questions or concerns?
One of the questions I had is, why are the the docks now on the east and not along the 355? And I understand that argument could go both ways. So now with the next subdivision or whatever's going to be built there is going to have to worry about some sort of screening.
It's going to be industrial.
Well, it's
to
the
the
comp
east?
plan shows it industrial.
Yeah, well, actually what happened was last year, the year before, we had a group of people called the Hillwood Group, and they had come before the council with a, there it is. They had come before the council with a concept plan because they were looking to do similar large, big box industrial development, and that did not comply with the comp plan. So they came through with a concept plan. The concept plan was reviewed by staff and this commission, as well as forwarded on to the city council, and the city council did approve, deviating from the comprehensive plan and allowing for an extension of the similar type of industrial development. So it will be industrial.
Good, okay. And then just one other question. From the preliminary original PUD to the proposed changes in front of us today, I'm just looking at a simple percentage. You had 80 truck docks and 120 trailer parking spaces, which is about a 150% ratio. Now, the new one is less than 100. Is that, do you have an end user in mind, and is it something typical? I don't know if there's a standard ratio that goes along with the industry, with logistics, or, but there's a lot less on a per dock base, if it even matters, but kind of stood out to me.
You know, I can't speak to the specifics of that because unfortunately for me, I'm pinch hitting for my partner who's down in Florida. But what I do know is Panattoni is a national developer and tailors these buildings to the market, and that it's not leased up at this point. So based upon what they see in market demand is how they design these.
And that is also the reason why when this did come through, they kind of left this last lot is kind of flexible because they wanted to see how the first two buildings would go and then what the market would dictate in terms of whether or not there was a need for 2 additional buildings or whether they needed to kind of come up with a different concept. So they at the beginning, they purposely did not come forward with this portion of the lot because they did not know what the market conditions would require and the direction that they would go specifically.
It's just great, but it doesn't answer my question.
Well, this building's 43,600 square feet less than the other one.
No, I know, but it's just
So what's the ratio is you're
the
asking?
ratio. I mean, just, you have 60 docks, 60 doors, because that means, and you have less than that in spaces, so if someone's at the dock filling up, or the door, and another one's waiting for that door to be open, you only have room for one. That gets pulled out I mean, do we have something in our ordinance or requirement that?
There's no trailer parking or even dock provision requirement in our ordinance, but, you know, we've really left those up to the developer to determine what they want to provide for those amounts, as opposed to normal car parking spaces where we have a minimum requirement. So, yeah, I see what you're saying. There's a ratio, you know, you have 60 versus 80, but now there's 57 versus 120. So it's a significantly different ratio when you're just comparing the docks and the parking spots. But, yeah, it was 2 separate buildings, and the end users or what the market dictates, you know, what one user needs in parking versus docks could vary from user to user.
So in the future, if some reason they need, I'm probably making a bigger deal about this than I need to, but in the future, the user now has a need for more of those spots. Can he use the land banking spots you're talking? Because you're talking now using that for something else.
That's correct. The land banked area only takes up a portion of the remaining green space, and we actually do not have a requirement for total impervious coverage in the industrial parks, unless it's in a PUD, which this one does not have one. So they actually could utilize that additional green space if they wanted to come back later with a plan to add more trailer parking. Although probably the design of this site wouldn't really lend itself to that because it's really all auto parking on the west.
Okay, that's all I had that has any relevance to it. Thank you.
Mr. Oxley?
I have nothing.
Mrs. Wold?
I have no questions.
Mr. Thies?
So Jim's question was exactly my question, and I must have not been at the meeting where the other plan was presented, so I apologize for not realizing that that was actually a part of a previous consideration. And that's on that plan. So the only issue or thought that I would have on this plan, because it is a PUD, we have a little bit more flexibility. And on the west side of this, adjacent to the open space, from an appearance standpoint, a strict adherence to our parking lot screening requirement seems a little foreign to the aesthetic or the approach that's going to be taken out here. It's like we've got a line of shrubs that line this thing, but we've got this giant green space that's going to be a bunch of turf. Seems like we could be a little bit more flexible with that approach and actually bring things out into that space. Yeah.
I can respond to that. The uniqueness about this property is that it's the signage issue. And one of the things, because John Lane Crossing is a public street, which will be shared by this development as well as any future development to the other side. Again, I had a conversation with Jason Rosenberg, and I had asked him, you know, had they had any plans or interest in doing a development sign, not one that just had the tenants in there, but an actual development sign. And there was some discussion, he said, that because of that extra open space, they were going to be contemplating doing some really nice park signage, with some nice landscaping. So there is some thought process to what they would do with that open space.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine. I'm just saying, I don't know how many acres that is, but it looks like it's probably well over 2 or 3 acres. I can't imagine a sign is gonna take up 3 acres of land. The point was, you know, this little row of shrubs that's 2 feet off the parking lot, that seems like it's in a lot more danger of getting hit by the fronts of cars and other things and looking worse than if we actually allowed them to expand that out a little bit wider. Same number of plant material, but just done in a slightly different way, just from an appearance standpoint. Can't make you require that, but this ends up looking like a triangular piece of grass as opposed to a space that could be enjoyed by the people that are adjacent. My comment earlier, or my thought earlier, if we would have flipped this, is, and I don't know if you guys explored that, but actually angling the building so that the green space was at the end of the cul-de-sac, so it could actually be visible from the neighbors, because Lord knows we've been pounded by the neighbors across the street for, I don't know how many years, but 3 years in doing this project. So it seems like that might have offered a better opportunity to have something at the end that could be enjoyed by all 7 buildings as opposed to just the 2 that are framed by this. Again, not saying that we have any option to change anything, but the landscape seems like something that could be adjusted.
Yeah, at a very minimum, I think those shrubs that are immediately next to the curb of the parking lot could be shifted over so they're not, you know, so snow's not plowed into them and cars are not bumping into them, and uses up some of that additional green space, yeah.
That's my only comment.
As the snowplow doesn't get to them.
Thank you, Pam, for the explanation on the parking flipping. That was very helpful.
The initial concept plan called for buildings 1 and 2 were there and complete, ready to go. Initially, it called for buildings 3 and 4 running east and west of the lot. And the petitioner says, based on market demand, he wants to revise this to this building 3 running north and south, dictated by market demand, and that's all we need to know. He's not obligated to disclose his potential clients, his investors, or much of anything else. If he says that's what the market demands, I think that's good enough. You know, so I have no objections to what's being proposed, and if the petitioner is agreeable with all the staff's recommendations.
Can I offer one more thought on this? My only other consideration is for people that are driving on Division Street, going westbound, the corner of the building and all of the truck docks are in their primary view as they're coming there. The other option with that kind of plant material over on the other side is to offer flexibility, again, within the context of the PUD, and move some of that plant material to better help screen that corner of it. Based on the future plan, that one has a building that's facing Division Street, and we would be able to have an appropriate architectural aesthetic. But this is the one that you would see all of the truck docks all the way through that area. So, you know, again, nobody is going to see that triangular piece of property because it's higher. Nobody will ever see the shrubs. I'm sure that the 40 people that park in those parking spots could care less whether there are shrubs in front of them or not. You know, if we could have some flexibility to move some of that plant material down there, either in the detention area or around that corner, that would help screen that view for those people that would be driving on it, just thinking in the future.
They're going up the bridge, they're going up the overpass on Division Street.
Which makes it worse, because you're gonna look down into the truck dock area. I'm just looking, you know, we have flexibility because of the PUD, and so we have a lot of plant material over here that nobody's really gonna ever really care about. So if we have that opportunity to improve the aesthetic on behalf of the community.
The east side?
On the southeast corner.
Okay.
I'm not worried about the east side because that's all going to be facing other truck docks. But it's really the southeast corner in the area around the detention basin that would be very visible for those people that are driving westbound on Division Street. So
that's a consideration. Sure.
It's just an opportunity to improve it for the community. So when we talk about PUD, benefits for the community at large versus opportunities for the developer, that's one way that we could start to look at that.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak in this particular case? Yes, sir, just step up to the microphone, state your name.
My name is Dan Harrison. I live in the subdivision that's basically just due north of the truck warehouse, I'll call it, okay? I'm not saying that to be condescending or dismissive. Just a couple of concerns. My wife and I moved here 2005, 2006. On 163rd, it's a double yellow all the way from Cedar all the way over to Gauger, okay? People like to go along there jogging, bicycling, and so on. It's double yellow all the way down along. And it's not totally flat, okay? There are a few dips and so on. I think our emergency rooms are busy enough without having to worry about joggers and so on. But my point here is, as long as there's enough space for any trucks that are waiting to load and unload, so they're not actually parked out on 163rd Street, okay? Would also say that, given the prevailing winds, if trucks are idling, we're gonna be smelling the exhaust, okay? That's just a fact of life. Please factor all these things in. The other thing is, I'm the guy that gets to mow our yard, and for the last couple of years, we've had more water in our yard than previously. Our lot is a corner of Chancellor and Regent, and it's sloped from north to south for water drainage. And there's behind us, directly to the east, is a nice farm. You can hear the guys out shotgunning and so on, and you know, they grow their crops. But that land, how can I do this? The land comes over, slopes down, and towards the back of our lot, and there's just an area with a lot of bushes and so on, you know, for water drainage. We're just getting more water accumulating there and staying there for later in the year, last 2 years. This is just my observation. So I am not against this. I'm not trying to block this or whatever. I would just say, please, first off, don't have any trucks because parking on 163rd. Make sure that to make the point, if any emergency vehicles need to get through or people are crossing over the double yellow to pass, sometimes it's not as easy to see around a 18-wheeler as it is to see around you know, the old-fashioned VW Beetles, you know, like when I was in high school. The safety issue. Similarly, please have them shut off the trucks if they're waiting to load up. The other thing that concerns us is just water drainage, which seems like it's been altered in the last 2 years. If you guys, by putting up a third building or 10 more buildings, you increase the water drainage, God bless you, okay? But those are the points that I just wanted to make. Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you. Well, the drainage from this property all goes to the retention pond at the south end, correct? So there shouldn't be any water running off of this property into adjacent properties.
Correct, but this property passes through a large amount of water from the north. And they have a 42-inch pipe that picks up the water from under 163rd. So it accepts that drainage. Now, if there's growth of bushes or something that's blocking some of that, it may have to be looked at.
Okay. The other gentleman's concern was possibility of congestion with trucks trying to get in and out of the overall facility, getting backed up on 163rd Street. Does that seem like anything at all likely?
It sounded like the concern was trucks parking illegal on 163rd. I've never heard that, but if that's the case, that's certainly an enforcement issue that where they could be cited.
Well, that would be contingent on the usage of your occupants here. If it was very truck intensive, where you had a couple dozen trucks trying to get in and out all at the same time, I could see that potentially happening. But if this is going to be, truck traffic typically is spread out during the course of the day, coming and going. As far as
This request actually reduces the intensity of what was formerly.
exactly, yeah, this
By 43,000 square feet.
and the number of trucks and truck docks. Regarding truck idling, there used to be a problem where an over-the-road trucker would show up at 3 o'clock in the morning from out of town and sit there idling his truck until later 9 o'clock when the place opened up. Illinois state law specifically prohibits idling a truck for extended amounts of time. You know, and the thing is, sometimes the out-of-town trucker's not aware of that, and we've asked with the developments like yours that you specifically post that state statute on the property, so out-of-town truckers are aware that idling a truck for an extended amount of time is not accepted practice in the state of Illinois. If the truckers are in compliance with that, there shouldn't be any extended idling. They make an exception for refrigerator trucks or concrete mixers or stuff like that that have to keep running, but to have the prime mover of the truck sitting there running extended amounts of times is prohibited by law. Is there anyone else here with any questions or concerns? This time we'll close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Staff's recommendations are on page 5 right there. Recommended approval with the,
I would make a motion to concur with staff's recommendations.
Second.
motion from Mr. Rockley, second from Mr. Thies to concur with staff's recommendations as published on page 5. A roll call vote. Any questions on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Jim Bellotta?
Yes.
Dave Oxley?
Yes.
Sherry Wold?
Yes.
Bill Mahoney?
Yes?
And Lance Davis?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Let's go to the city council.
And just for the record, we'll add that condition in there about shifting some of that landscaping along the west row of parking away from the curb line. Perhaps we can do it similarly to what we did with the truck dock row. We made it so that it's 10 foot away, so that any trucks that would be backing into that won't hit it. So what we can do is we can kind of be consistent, maybe pull it off the same distance.
That would be great. Thank you, Pam.
Okay, when will this go to the city council? The commission of the whole?
This will go, the first meeting in September.
For the committee of the whole, okay. Which is?
September 7th.
7th, yes, September 7th. Committee of the whole right here. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, is there any other business? Any citizens to be heard on any other matter? Sure.
Bill, on that point, he mentioned the drainage on that property at Regal Acres is the subdivision. When McNaughton was coming in to work to
Yep, this
build
proposal.
that farm
Yeah.
to the east of that, there was a water issue then at that time.
Don't remind me of those days.
Yeah, well, I think Regal Acres is to the north and considerably higher, isn't it?
No,
Yeah.
but there was a water issue on the east side of it then.
Yeah.
Yes, there's
It
large
just-
number of acres that comes to.
Drops into it, yeah. Right.
They're accepting it, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean there could be a local issue
Yeah.
with just getting it there.
Because the funny part was one of the guys was here from Rudiger and Tonelli, and he says, believe me, the owner of our firm lives here. And then I asked him after the meeting, I said, you realize Dennis sold his house 2 months ago? He just looked at me. He said, yeah, he moved. But, yeah, Dennis originally did that subdivision.
Hearing no further business, have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Motion from Moxley, second from Thies. All in favor? Aye. Aye, motion carries.